Go ahead and get started. A copy of the Open Meetings Act is located on the north wall of the legislative chambers. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll begin with the agenda for the Douglas County Board of Equalization. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Boyle, Commissioner Duda, Commissioner Kraft, Commissioner Morgan, Commissioner Rogers, Commissioner Tusha.
Here.
Madam Chair.
Here, item A, approval of the minutes of the Board of Equalization meeting held Tuesday, July 26, 2011. And item C, call for a meeting and set Tuesday, August 9, 2011 as a date for hearing on certified assessment corrections reflecting the addition of omitted property to the tax rolls or increased value on property.
Motion approved.
Any questions or comments? Please vote.
Motion passes.
Citizen comments. Is there anyone here wishing to speak to the Board of Equalization about a matter not on the agenda? We do have one. Mr. Monty Bowman came about 3 weeks ago with an issue, and can you just reiterate the issue to us?
Yeah, I've spoke with Mike Goodwillie a little bit about this morning. Some of the process for requesting records.
Could you state your name and address?
My name is Monty Bowman. I live in Ralston, Nebraska, and I work a lot with commercial and residential property valuation protests.
Thank you.
From last year to this year, the process in which a property owner is to request information concerning their property to find out how the valuation done, that process changed this year. Normally you would go in, make one request for a property record file, and you get everything, the property profile, calculations for cost basis, income approach, or comparables. But this year it's completely different. You have to go in and ask for them specifically. So I sent an affidavit to every member of the board, and what had occurred was I was still doing protests in northeast Iowa. I gave a list to my assistant. She went down to get that list, and when I got back, all it was property profile cards. So I had to go back with her, and I called Keith Nielsen with the assessor's office, and he explained that the process changed and the departments were scattered this year. So you have to go in and make a specific request for each of those items you want in the record card to get it. So that's what we did. And we had actually been in every week through the month of June, and we finally got them at the end, but we hit during homestead exemption, which was the last 10 days, so they had that going, they had the protest going. It was just a real mess because they changed the whole process this year. The reason it was so important is because once you could figure out which approach they used, then you can come up with a ground to file your protest. Because once you file that ground, you can't change it. You can add evidence anytime you want. But if you don't see which method they used to calculate, two of them were real big funplex because there's no way to do anything with a comparable. It was cost approach only. The Hampton Inn, the only thing they could use was an income basis. So by the time I got those two, I'm sitting here and now I know what argument we have to use for the two, because then we take their income statement, correct the numbers for vacancy, occupancy. The difference is almost $2.9 million in value, $67,000 a year. Then you get the ones that show cost basis only, and they're using an amusement park open 3 months of the year, and the buildings are all calculated at 100% occupancy, and they're only open a few months out of the year, not the entire year. Same way occupancy, vacancy for hotels. So that told us what argument we could then use. And that's where there was a big confusion this year. The referee system in CAS, SARPI, all of them allow you to know when the hearing's going to be, even if you don't go to it. So you have plenty of time to finish putting your evidence together. We've worked with referees, SARPI, and in CAS. So after we go to a hearing, they tell us of additional evidence that they may need, or we need more pictures. And that's what usually happens in the referee system here. You go into your referee, you present your evidence, you'll find additional evidence that will help them make their decision. And that's what we were lacking this year, because there is no hearing. You don't have the opportunity to present the additional evidence. That was our argument, was it was due process, we couldn't go through.
Okay. Mr. Goodwill, can you come up for a minute, because I know that there's been some back and forth with the two of you, but with these being commercial, were they not in April started in April?
Mike
when we do
Goodwillie, Douglas.
preliminary?
Yeah, Mike Goodwillie, Douglas County Assessor's Office. For every commercial property that changed, you're absolutely right, Commissioner. We sent out a preliminary notice postcard back in April, advising those commercial property owners of what their new value would be, and providing the opportunity for them to come in and meet with our appraisal staff in early May. The idea being that perhaps we can come to a meeting of the minds, or at least get additional information that would be helpful to be sure the value is accurate. And indeed, if the information was useful, we would then make a recommendation to the referees to reduce the value from what we initially had. And I think of, now the list I had from Mr. Bowman was the last list he gave to our staff the 20th or 21st of June, and there were 14 parcels on that list, and I think 10 of those were commercials. I think 9 of them had an increase, so they would have gotten postcards, and I think all but a couple that got increases did come in and do the preliminary hearing process. So at least those property owners were aware of our starting point on value and had at least gone as far as to talk about it and knew they were going to file some kind of a protest, probably as far back as April.
I do have to add one thing to that. One of the other things that changed in the process this year was normally when they go through this procedure, I can go in, it's an informal resolution. They're going to give us an idea of where they plan on lowering it to, so we can see if it's close enough to the number so we don't waste their time.
Right.
This year they don't tell you. They say they will recommend a reduction, but they won't tell you how much. So that leaves me in a position I still have to file because I don't know. Again, we were left in the dark. And
well, the reason we went that direction is a little bit like the reason that the county board's referees are assigned to particular areas or neighborhoods. What we didn't want to end up happening is, you know, Mr. Bowman's talking to appraiser A, somebody that owns another similar property is talking to appraiser B. Each of them has a different recommendation, and it doesn't fit within the equalization for that class or subclass. So the idea was to get the information, go back to the office, kind of kick it around about, you know, hotels or filling stations or whatever class of property it was, you know, so that we didn't have wild variances between, you know, so somebody didn't play appraisal lotto, you know, and somebody do real well and somebody do not so well.
Well, that makes sense. The last question I have is in terms of the process change. One, why was that change? It seems like that would be a little bit more fragmented for the citizen. And then
it actually was kind of a quality
control.
control.
Just a minute, I'm not.
Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize.
Two, second part of that, were they notified when the preliminary notice went out of this change?
Let me take the second one first. The preliminary postcard is kind of bare bones. It says, here's your value, here's where you can meet with us. It doesn't really go into detail about obtaining records. Some people are interested in getting our records. Other people have an appraisal, or they have something else that they want to bring in on their own. And so, no, there wasn't any explanation there. The reason we started doing it a little bit differently this year is more of a quality control thing. What we wanted to do is gather the records together and then have somebody in our appraisal staff take a look at them before they went out to be sure that they were complete. Because we had some instances in the past where some things went out, they weren't entirely complete, and that was a problem.
Okay. Not quite following that one, but are there any other questions or comments? And so, Commissioner Rogers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, Mike, is this something that, since it was a change in you all's processes in the beginning, that you usually do? I mean, is that something that we should be even ruling on to overrule because ours is pretty much the back end?
Well, I think Mr. Bowman's here because this ties into the county board protest and referee process. If I'm understanding what's kind of under the surface here for Mr. Bowman is, in other counties where you get a face-to-face meeting with the referee, usually the property owner would file his protest in the month of June, and then he gets his meeting with the referee in July, and at that point he'll bring in his appraisal, or he'll bring in his pictures, or he'll at least get to make some kind of a verbal argument that says the value's too high because. Now, Douglas County, because of its volume and because of the ability to assign referees by neighborhood to get maybe a little more consistent take, has decided to go to a process where, you know, we really prefer to have your writing. We need to have your writing prior to June 30th, and I can certainly understand that. I mean, we had what, 5,500 or thereabouts protests this year just because we are so big, we get so many more protests, and it's a little bit overwhelming. So I'm certainly not second-guessing the board's choices in that regard. But I think that's really what's under the surface here is, it's hurry up and file the protest by June 30, and that's the one bite you're going to get at the apple, and you better have your evidentiary ducks in a row to start with.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been not meeting face-to-face for like 3 years, so that part's not new.
Was it 2 years or 3 years, Rick? 3? Okay. Yeah, that sounds right.
I guess that's what I'm trying to get at is we haven't been meeting face-to-face for 3 years. And because the process, that commercial process appeal is something you all instituted, I don't know if that's something that needs to be handled here and shouldn't be handled on the back end of the BOE process sometime next week.
Mm-hmm. I think that this brings up one of those process issues that when someone has additional information, are we going to allow them to submit that at some point in time before the end of the BOE? Is that correct?
That's part of it. The reason this has changed from the last 3 years on the referee system is normally there's been enough time to get the information to put together the protest before the 30th and to be able to stay with it. This is just a different issue from the 3 because we've dealt with the referee system here before, but if they've needed something, they've asked for it. We're able to send it, but we couldn't get to the information enough to put into the solid argument because evidence you can always add anytime you want. You cannot change the argument, and that's where we were locked in. You can't change that. If you use commercial and you say you're doing an equalization, that's all you're going to be able to use. You can't come back if they use cost or if they came back and used income. Once you discover that, you got to stay with that.
Madam Chair, can I ask, did the time process change from last year?
No.
So, Mr. Boyd, I'm trying to get on, you're saying the time process changed.
The time process was trying to gather the information. It used to be all together in one spot. When you went in and made a request, it was all there. Now it's fragmented. It's in different spots. The process itself is the only thing that changed in the request for the information. So when you could get the file, normally when you asked for it, it was all in one packet. Now they've got quality control, as he was saying, so different departments have it segmented. And if you go in to ask for it, you can say a property record file or a property record card. They change different by the code. So the definition
I just want to make
there.
sure for the record, to me, that's not a time process change. That's another change.
Well, the time is the amount of time they have to produce those records is normally 4 days. Well, this was a confusion because it went well beyond the 4 days because we didn't just come in the last time to ask for the records. We'd been there through the month because the first 2 times we kept getting property profiles. Normally when we asked, we had it all in one bundle. And that's why after it changed, we went back, talked to them, found out that they changed it, and then we went and specifically requested what we were looking for. And that was if it's income, if it's comparable, if it's cost, and we had to itemize every one of the items that we wanted. That's what was on our list.
But this brings up a bigger issue then, which I didn't understand until you just said it, was that you wanted to change what you were submitting to the Board of Equalization.
No, I couldn't. I'm filing a protest, and I'm not putting any argument in because I don't have one. I can put it in by the 30th, but until I see what method they used, I can't say that I'm doing equalization. You must pick one of the 3, and you have to stand by that. You can't change in midstream by law.
You can't pick both?
No.
Sure you can.
You can pick 2, or you can pick all 3, but then you got to come back and go ahead and cover yourself for which one.
Right.
Because you're going to have to guess at which one or just cover all 3. And normally we've had more than enough time to find out which one it is. Then we can always get our evidence in time. It's not a big issue. It's finding out what you have to put on the argument.
Right.
Because you can't change that argument.
So the bottom line for this year is you want to break away from what our rules say, that you cannot submit new evidence or change your...
Only because the process itself didn't allow me to get the records in the time allowed by law. That's the only reason. Otherwise, I would say no. But in a normal request for information, I've always received it in time. It was always one packet. It changed this year. I didn't get it in enough time to put together the protest by law.
Okay.
That's what our argument is, and it's what leads into the second part of it.
Okay.
The request for the information, how do we get it in one spot? When you were talking about the data record management system the other day, I wanted to jump up and go, please, find everything in one spot. That's how we'd had it for a long time.
Which we had it that way.
It used to be that way up until just this year. 2 years before, we've never had a problem. It's been the same referee system, but you've always gotten the information in enough time to get that argument put together to put it in.
Okay. Commissioner Rogers?
I hear you, Mr. Bowman, but right now, just me personally, I don't know if I want to alter the process for one situation, because unless this is and I haven't heard a massive reply back from a lot of people having the same situation, and I hear what you're saying about that little process change, but I mean, when I hear it, the time actually has changed. There's a couple of steps in between, so at least me personally, I definitely have sympathy for your situation, but I think if you open that door, you're opening something wide open. So that's where I'm at with it.
You still have the ability, if your protest isn't adequate at our level, to appeal and add new evidence.
We understand that. My big question is the first question foremost is that by the law, 4 days is when we were supposed to receive the information that was not provided. That's the big issue, because that's what leads to the second issue. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise, everything would have been in. I filed 74 last year, 85 the year before. This is only 21 protests. I mean, it's not an issue of can I get them done in time if I've got the issues to work with.
So by law, we didn't give him the stuff in a timely manner?
We were tardy on the records. To be fair to our clerical staff,
they were overwhelmed.
That's peak protest and peak homestead season, and we were late. That said, he got all the records he needed. Mr. Bowman got all the records he needed on the 27th. A protest postmarked as late as June 30 is still good.
And they were
so there was at least a window to review those materials once Mr. Bowman received them.
Did you just say they were postmarked?
All of them were postmarked. I took them down directly and had them sign a receipt for each one of them on the last day, because by then I had an argument to present, but then I had to put together the argument because I had to go through 14 complete files.
So you have them filed. You
I
just
filed the
haven't
protest.
got the new evidence.
I couldn't put the evidence in because I didn't know the argument.
There.
I didn't know the argument. And my problem was that I couldn't get the evidence. I had to concentrate on making sure I had an argument that I could then present evidence for. Because if you don't have an argument, they can throw it out.
I have, Mr. Kubat, how many other, or if any others, have talked about this, us not having the information to them by the required law?
Mr. Bowman's situation is the only situation that I'm familiar with where a filer has put forth that they didn't receive necessary information from the assessor's office to be able to put their argument together.
And so I guess I'm a little torn here, because if it was our fault that we didn't get them through the assessor's office, the information in the statutory timely manner, then how can we not let him submit the information, even though our rules say you can't submit or change? To me, that's just wrong. If we made the mistake, why punish the person who was trying to do the stuff right?
Well, Commissioner, that's your call, but I see Diane Carlson behind you kind of waving her finger. I'm not sure who she's waving it at, but it sounds like she wants to be heard.
It wouldn't be us. Diane.
Thank you. I just want to clarify that I believe the law that he's referring to is the Open Records Statute, which states that if a request is made for public records, that the public entity has to provide some sort of response within the 4 days. Now, I'm not sure, but just based on the information that I have from Mr. Mike Goodwillie, it sounds as though the request came in sometime around June 20th or June 21st, that members of the assessor's office must have contacted you, Mr. Bowman, to at least tell you that they're working on it.
No, I needed to clarify. There was an affidavit. I'm sorry I didn't send it to you, but I gave it to Mr. Goodwillie. He's got a copy. We had been in each week, and again, the first time we came in, first week we asked for him, we came back, it was a property profile. Second time I sent her in, again, the same thing happened, so I went in with her on a legal pad, everything described. It was my third visit to the office on the 21st or 22nd, not the first. And that's why we have been working on this thing all month trying to get the records. It wasn't just once trying to get it. It's because we didn't get everything at once.
But I guess what I'm getting at, under the open records law, there is some leeway there, especially if the entity doesn't know exactly specifically what it is you're asking for. And that sometimes happens where you ask for something, they try to accommodate that, and then they receive more information. Oh, no, this is really what I need. I don't know if that's what happened here or not, but
the statutes dealing with protests and filing a property tax protest do not contain any sort of guidance or address, as far as I know, the assessor having to provide specific information within a certain time frame. And so
You are correct, but that's not what our question was. Every citizen for the last 2 years under the referee system has gone in, requested one request, and received the entire file. That same request did not give you the same information this year, but nobody got notice that there was a change.
Okay,
Not
but then
until
when
after the fact.
so when you received the file that wasn't everything that you wanted, there was additional discussions, I take it, with the assessor to get that information. And in the end, I don't know why the trigger date is June 21st, but that must have been something that you put in writing to them saying...
It was the fourth time, and this time I went in a second time in person to Marlene personally because I'd already had my assistant in twice already in the month. I personally went in. That was the list that he got, the very last one. But there's an affidavit. Anybody can check with Marlene's schedule. We'd been in more than once through the month of June. We discovered this after the fact. It wasn't something that was known or presented to the public that they changed the process. And I've been doing this for a few years, so it come completely unaware to me.
Right, and I'm following you. I just want to make sure that the board understands that I do not think that there's no statutes under the protest anyway that have a deadline or a timeline dealing with the county assessor providing information. There is open record statutes that certainly we need to abide by, but in this case, it sounds as though that was trying to be done, and in fact the information, and just so I'm clear, you did receive it all by June 27th. Was
Yes,
that
I did.
Did you pick it up at the office? Was it mailed to you?
I picked it up at their office. They called us, we went directly down and picked it up.
Okay.
Okay, so bottom line is either this board agrees to let him submit the
Can I ask one more
additional
question?
information, or we say no, and then the issue's dead. Commissioner Rogers?
And Mr. Bowman, at least let me back up to what you just said. Based on what legal counsel just said, and this is what I'm trying to wrap my head around, you're saying you've been doing this for years, and I'm assuming everybody else has been doing it for years, but you're the only one that's got caught up by what's been saying, and that's what I'm not exactly, I can't level out. Because everybody else, and like I'm saying earlier, it's not so much a time adjustment. The time is the same. It seems like there's a few tweaks in the process, and I'm trying to wrap my head around the fact that, I'm sure everybody else that's in there has been doing it for years, and I understand you're the only one that got caught up, and that's what's making me...
I think Mr. Goodwill would be able to answer that question better because I know there's a lot of other people that represent a lot of clients, so I don't know how their requests went. I'm just saying if you're a standard homeowner, if you were to go in there, and if you've done it before, you make one request, you got everything. If you did it this year, you would not have gotten the same thing.
But am I correct? Am I correct in saying that you're doing this for people? You're not doing this for your own home?
Right.
No, I'm doing it. I do it as a business.
Okay.
I've been doing it for quite a few years.
That's my
why
point.
there's never been a process change until this year. If I'd have been aware of it, and I always call to try to find out, but this was a process that was not made available. I mean, there's been changes over the last few years to the referee systems, and we've gotten used to it. But we just didn't know about this one. We didn't know there was a severance. It's always been in one spot. It's been very simple. We never knew until after the fact.
That's my point. And I understand, based on what legal counsel just said in regards to Mr. Goodwill and delay, I was feeling a little bit of change in my mind, but you're not the average homeowner, and you're representing some people, and you're a business operating to do it for some people. And I'm assuming some other people came in the same way. What I can't get my head around is that changes are happening every year, and people are doing that. And this is, like you're saying, it's not a time change. It was a change in the process that does happen. And if it was a series where everybody was coming up, or you had a good amount of people saying they were coming up, and this was happening, I could wrap my head around it better for an exception. But the fact that you have been doing it for some years, everybody else has, and this is the only situation that's happening, I can't come at peace with exempting it for the whole body.
The only reason I brought up the public records is it was Mr. Goodwill during our first event that brought up the 4 days and brought up the 22nd as the date. I hadn't gone back and looked at my calendar to see when we'd started. Then I sat down with my assistant who had gone to the office. We talked to Marlene personally after the hearings just to verify when we'd been in. She'd been in there 2-3 times. I'd been in there a couple of times. The last one was the only one that was presented on the record was the last date. but we'd been in there since the first week for our request. It wasn't until the second week that we got the first 2 property profile cards, and then I sent her in to get the next ones. Again, it was property profile. When we come in again the very last day, that's when everything was completely itemized again, because I'd already broke it down for her. But they take it from one department, and if they're busy, they wait and send it to another department, then it goes to a third. By the time it gets done, it went through 3 or 4 departments before they got the records. She called us. We got them late in the afternoon on the 27th. That gave me time to look and figure out what the argument would be, and then get them filed, get them signed by the owners. There wasn't enough time to put together the evidence. I just had to be able to look at what they used to come up with the value to figure out what my argument would be. Normally, we've never had a problem. I've always worked with the assessor's office. We've always had the information on time. That's never been a problem.
Okay. I haven't heard from anyone else, but I'm taking that as the board's not wanting to allow those exceptions to occur this year with you submitting the information late. So I think you'll just have to run it through the state process now. Thank you.
Okay.
With that, there's resolutions E, F, and G, H, I.
Motion approved?
And adjourn.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Adjourn.
Any questions or comments? Please vote. We'll move to the
Motion passes.
agenda for the Douglas County Board of Commissioners. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Boyle, Commissioner Duda, Commissioner Kraft, Commissioner Morgan, Commissioner Rogers,
Here.
Commissioner Tusha.
Here.
Madam Chair.
Here. Item A, approval of minutes of Board of Commissioners meeting held Tuesday, July 26, 2011, and item B, approval of claims submitted for payment process through Tuesday, August 2nd, 2011. Complete listing is on file in the office of the County Clerk Comptroller.
Motion approved A and B?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Please vote.
Motion passes.
Consent agenda, there's a total of 6 items, A through F.
Motion approved?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Please vote.
Motion passes.
Citizen comments, is there anyone here wishing to speak to the Board of Commissioners about an item not on the agenda? We'll move to committee. First one being Finance. Commissioner Kraft.
Yes, it appears we're on track with the budget, and the report is as presented.
And there's one resolution.
That's right. We have a resolution regarding rebonding, and if I could ask our Finance Director to address this, please. Joe?
Yeah, we're have a preliminary resolution to for preliminary approval to refinance up to $28 million of the corrections bonds, and this is really being driven by the current interest rate environment where rates have fallen again, where by undergoing this refinancing we could save the county in excess of $2 million by replacing the bonds with bonds at lower interest rate. And so that's our recommendation, that we proceed with this so that we can realize those savings.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second?
Any questions or comments?
I would like to make one comment. I appreciate the information that the parties to this provided, the professionals, and also the work that Joe Lorenz did answering my questions. I appreciate it very much. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Boyle. Please vote.
Motion passes.
Next is the Administrative Services. Commissioner Tusha.
I'll let you go ahead and
Okay.
take care of the blue ribbon.
This is a resolution creating a Blue Ribbon Committee to conduct review of the operations at the Douglas County Health Center, Community Mental Health Center, and Department of General Assistance. And just a way of background, during our planning session for our budget and strategic planning, and as we've talked about from the time we've adopted our current budget, we know that we're going to start off next fiscal year with about almost a $12 million shortfall due to some of the operations that we have at the health center. And so it became obvious to us that we needed to take a broader look at what the county does. We cannot continue to put out a call letter requesting a 4% or whatever percent it is for every elected official and department to do in order for us to make our budget. So with this being one of our larger areas of cost and interest, we decided we were going to put together a committee to take a look at the operations and come back with recommendations. So from that, each commissioner submitted 2 names, and today we're approving the creation of that committee. And
Mine are changed.
His names are not the same as on there.
oh, okay, I'm going to make sure I note of that. And so we'll approve this committee today, and then we are also, one of the next resolutions is to use the facilitator that we used during our planning session, Mary Lee Brock from the Werner Institute, to walk us through this process, and along with our staff and obviously the staff from each one of those areas, and then come back. I know I'm being a little aggressive with timelines, but I'm hoping by the end of the year, but we're getting a little started a little late, so it may not be until January. I don't want to say that that's a lock, but that's what we're going to try to shoot for. But we definitely want some recommendations from this committee to come back to the board on what we should be looking at with these services. So with that, the resolution before us is again the creation with the following individuals: Alta Sharp, Rob Woodling, George Mills, Scott Anderson, John Prouty. It should be Prouty.
Correct. The gremlins got into my computer.
Gremlins got in there. And Pat O'Hanlon.
O'Hanlon.
O'Hanlon, Hanlon.
Correct.
Patricia Zieg, Fred Grossman, Sam Clark, Bert Wise, Walter Brooks, Doris Moore, Beth Furlong, and Don Prohaska. So I would make
Motion approved.
Second.
Any other questions or comments? Please vote.
Motion passes.
Do you want me to take the next?
Yeah.
The next one is the resolution retaining, as I said earlier, Miss Mary Lee Brock to serve as facilitator of the Blue Ribbon Committee, and there's a resolution set forth.
Motion approved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Please vote.
Motion passes.
Okay. The last one is the resolution approving the Douglas County vision, mission, and value statements. And with all of these, I'm very excited about the board's, one, willingness to come back to the table and do strategic planning, but to finally commit to having a vision, mission, and value statement. And the importance of that is, again, because we're talking about trying to set our budget based on priorities, we have to come up with those statements to say, okay, we have this issue, and how does that roll back onto our vision and mission and value statements? And as we walk through this, I think the board members will see a little bit better of how this actually falls into place. And so I'm very excited, and we worked real hard. Commissioner Rogers and Mr. Bloomingdale and I sat and took everybody's comments from the planning session and tried to incorporate them into all of these statements. And so I submit those to you today. Our vision is to be one of the elite counties in the United States. Our mission is to respect and respond to Douglas County citizens and provide quality services in a cost-effective and efficient manner. And our value statements are: we value responsive government, we value public engagement, we value collaborative and creative problem solving, and we value public-private partnerships. And stay with me, Commissioner Boyle, stay with me. And so there I submit those, and I ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
And I don't think I'm going to take comments on this one now. Are there comments?
Well, Commissioner Duda's light is on, and I think it's in his absence, some spirit has moved into me. No, that's all right. I just had to give you a little bit of a heart attack there.
But again, I thank you for your cooperation on getting us to this point. Please vote.
Motion passes.
As my dad always said, good things come to those who wait, so I finally got it. The next is the Human Resources Committee, the Civil Service Report, Human Resources Report as submitted, and no legislative items, no executive session.
Wow, that's great.
There is a Child and Youth Services Committee at 1 o'clock in room 903. And with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Please vote.
Motion passes.
I want to know which one took over, though.